Hi, as I've been asked quite often about an example of essay writing skills that we need to practice in junior English courses 102 and 103, I've decided to come up with a annotative, voice annotative video uh, and review some of the examples or articles that we could use it as examples for our essay writing in these courses. Um, my reservation for not posting the articles or examples online for students to use is mostly twofold. First of all, we are in junior English courses. In English 102, we are dealing with textual analysis, which is a critical reading of the text based on specific pieces of textual evidence. And in English 103, we are dealing with case studies, a research in case studies of a specific text. So in 102, we learn how to read and how to analyze the text based on the textual evidence. In 103, we learn how to research about and around the text and understand the text in its context, whether it's social context, political context, a specific context. That's why it's called case studies in research. When we get into senior courses and eventually after you students become like scholars, we put into practice, we merge the skills we learn in these two junior courses into practice to create a piece of scholarship which analyzes and puts that analysis into context and research about a specific text or issue. So these examples that we can access online or through the library or on Google Scholar, these are those advanced levels of research and essay writing where the authors are practicing both levels of skill. They are reading the text critically and putting that text into perspective of a specific context around the text and research the area, and then represents the findings in a case study of that specific text they're dealing with. However, for the purposes of English 102, I have some examples here to review with you. At the same time, I don't want to push you too hard into bringing like the context into the essay, because that's not the job here. And sometimes when we, the danger here is this, that when we, show the context to some students, they tend to just generalize about that context, and instead of reading the text carefully, analyzing the text based on pieces of textual evidence, they tend to just generalize and just throw ideas at the text without any support or without substantiating those claims. So that's the danger I want to avoid, and by reviewing these texts with you, these essays. And I hope it's going to be useful for you. The first example that I have here is a very short commentary on Jonathan Swift's A Modest Proposal, a text that I usually teach in 102. And through this example, as we read it, we want to see how the basic skills in reading that we discuss in class is useful in understanding a text and then talking about, analyzing that specific feature in the text. One of the skills, one of the factors in textual analysis that I usually recommend and practice in class is understanding the voice in the text. Who is speaking? Who is the speaker? And what can you understand from that voice? Now, in this essay, Initiation Right, Swift's A Modest Proposal, Sentence 1. In this example, John, the author is just looking at the first sentence in Swift's essay, not the rest of the essay, just the first sentence. And that is how we want to approach a text. Just one sentence, just one phrase. Or if you have keen eyes, just one word in order to come up with the ideas. So let's read this couple of paragraphs here. Too often critics become caught up in grand question concerning the modest proposal, debating whether Swift employs a persona or does not, whether to work more satirizes the English or the Irish, whether Swift, toward the work's close, drops his mask or not. As a result, they frequently overlook one of the Swift's most remarkable gifts, his powerful and playful but consummate management and manipulation of language at the level of sentence, clause, and phrase. So what we see in this initial part, in the first two sentences, is that the author is presenting an observation in the text, right? So that's how we start the essay. We talk about an observation, something that we observe in the text, and we think, and in most cases, in advanced cases, we know that general readers of the text, or even scholars in the field and scholars of that specific text, have missed or overlooked that aspect. So we foreground that observation, and we want to work with that observation. Here the observation is the use of language and the mask that this language creates for the speaker in the text. Even the specific verb or adjective is often so aptly determined that as rightly to rouse the envy of a Nabokov or a Flaubert. Thus, Swift's proposer is so finely factual and specific, particularly when it is most irrelevant to the monstrous immortality of the child slaughter and cannibalism. So, by showing that first sentence as calculative, as very factual, finely factual, the author of this essay is foregrounding the feature he wants to focus on. And that's the characteristics of this speaker in the text, which is so apt and dexterous in using the language that even the most famous authors would be fascinated by his skills. This is a way of keeping the reader engaged with your observation. And then he also shows what the speaker does with the language here. He will estimate specifically the weight of human carcass after the passing of precisely one solar year. That's what he does. Okay, and through this sentence, the writer wants to show the reason for his observation when he says the speaker is calculative, is very keen in his observations, and determines everything precisely. That's one of the clues here. Okay, and then a hindquarter of chopped baby will make a reasonable dish. So again, as in essays, in any text that we talk about the presence of a semantic field, this semantic field is like even valid in essays. Look at the semantic field that this author is creating for us. He's talking about how determined and precise and calculative and specific this speaker is, and uses the word reasonable from the text itself to show and substantiate that semantic field that he's trying to create. And all these words are creating the semantic field for you, a semantic field in which you understand that the speaker in this semantic field cannot be just a random person. He is educated, he knows things, and he calculates things. In no manner is the treatise monger of this piece more nicely portrayed than as placidly idiocentric arithmetician. So you see, now after creating a semantic field of being precise, calculative, specific, and reasonable, now the author is throwing out his own idea, his own interpretation, or his own argument about the observation they have created in the text. So he says that this speaker is some sort of idiocentric arithmetician. His busy proposal is chock full of the machinery of numbers, working with numbers. And he is happily busiest when doing sums. So these are the characteristics of the speaker. So when he calls the speaker an arithmetician, now he brings proof from the text to substantiate his claim, his argument about the speaker. He incessantly computes, calculates, subtracts, reckons, receipts of custom, expense, and whole numbers of his trade. He is, par excellence, a man devoted to numerology and materialism, to money and math. This is the speaker we are dealing with. And so these are proof from the text that we are dealing with an idiocentric arithmetician. And Swift contrives wickedly and wittily that this crass CPA fully exposed himself again and again in his own prose. For like the most sophisticated camera, Swift is brilliantly effective in exposure. So we have in the first paragraph an observation in the text and saying that, okay, why this observation matters, because scholars have overlooked observing and noticing this part. And then substantiate, inserts his own idea of that observation, that is the argument, inserting the argument, and substantiating that argument by pointing out specific pieces of evidence from the text. Then, in the third paragraph, we have the sentence we've been waiting for. The initial sentence in the proposal, therefore, is wonderfully calculated and contrived to reveal our man. He is divested of everything, save for his vested interest. So this is the topic sentence of this short essay. The initial sentence of the proposal is wonderfully calculated and tried to reveal our man or the speaker. So the first sentence, based on the observation and argument that he has proposed, he has put forward in the first two paragraphs, he's claiming that this first sentence, because it's calculative, it reveals this speaker, who he is and what he does. And that is a form of argument. And then the rest of the essay, as you can find it on eClass or other resources or through the library, just look for the title here, Initiation Right, Swift's modest proposal, sentence 1. So the rest of the essay, the writer just goes on to support his claim about the first sentence being calculative, which reveals the speaker and talks about who he actually is. He brings supportive details to substantiate this claim from the rest of the text. That's the formation of the rest of the essay. That's how he does it, to just talk about one sentence in a modest proposal. And he's not talking about anything else. One thing that I want you to pay attention is the start of the beginning of this essay. Quite often I see that in junior courses, students tend to write or start the essay by appraising the text or the author, saying that, oh, this author is the most famous or best author in 18th century or 20th century, the best novelist. His story is like blah blah blah, praising and acclaiming and acknowledging the importance of this text. And then after that, they tend to talk about general ideas around the text, or in worst case scenario, summarize the text. These are errors that you should avoid at any cost. Even if you can't find words to, for example, if there is a word count limit for your essay, let's say 1500, and then you cannot meet the word count, it's better not to meet the word count than summarizing the text or just talking about the text generally, just to fill the page. No. Look at this essay. He jumps into the issue right at the beginning. Okay? The grand question concerning the modest proposal, and that's a persona. How to know this persona, who this person is who's talking. Is it Swift or someone else? What is the mask they have? Rightly avoids any diversions or general talk about the text here as they go on. And that's how you should approach writing an essay. Now, let's have a look at another text here. Okay, this is an essay on Death of a Salesman by Arthur Miller, written by Christopher Baker. As you see, life is a casting off in Death of a Salesman. The title also explains things about your essay. As we will work on your skills in this class about writing essay, you'll know that you need a focal point, something in the text that would anchor your argument, your discussion in the text. And then you would argue something about that focal point. You will say something about that focal point. So, and summarizing your argument in one word and putting it next to the focal point creates your title. Here in this title, we only have the focal point. That's why it's in quotation marks here. Life is a casting off, quotation mark. That's a quotation from the text. So we just have the focal point. We don't have the argument. But it's still good enough. It's better than just saying that an essay on Death of a Salesman. It's too general and doesn't give us any clues of what they are going to talk about. So again, look at the example here. The author rightly just walks into the text from the angle he wants to analyze the text, and that's a quotation, or rather two quotations, that Linda Lohman, the wife of Willy Lohman, says in the play. And then without further ado, the writer just analyzes and talks about that one single quotation and expands it into the rest of the text. There's no general talk There's no talk about Arthur Miller being the best, you know, uh, writer of tragedy in modern ages or something like that. No, it's just the observation. Look at here. Though not as tragic a figure as her husband Willie, Linda Lohman is given two of the most memorable statements in Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman. So, just telling us that Linda is given, or these memorable statements, showing that, okay, that we want to talk about these statements. The play's signature quote, "Attention must be paid," has become a familiar tagline for writers and editorialists, but "Life is a casting off" carries that aphoristic authority that Miller said really sometimes needs to hear. And, as he said of a different scene, lends to the play shadings of veracity to which more attention should be paid. So what the writer here is doing is that saying that, okay, Linda Lohman, although not as a tragic figure as her husband, has these two very important quotations in the text. One of them has been the topic of this discussions among the critics and readers quite often, but one of them is not as analyzed and paid attention to as quite often, and that is "Life is a casting off." By observing and showing this observation, again, the writer is trying to show us his observation here. The thing here is that we are just going to look at how the writer here analyzes and reads the text based on this focal point and writes an essay about it. However, it's obvious that the writer here is also researching in the field, and he knows the field, the context around it. That is the subject of case studies in English 103. How to understand the context and the field around your text. Because he's talking about writers and editorialists and other critics talking about the text and including that research in his argument, merging that research in his argument to say something. But for English 102, we just want to focus on how this writer just focuses on one phrase and analyzes that one phrase and the approach they have here. Like most of the play's insights, Linda's comment is rooted in the realistic routines of Lohman's life. Okay, that's the observation. Unpacking the focal point, the phrase. It is directly linked to the recurring motive of her needlework, her repairing of the lining in Willie's jacket, and especially the mending of her stockings, which captures her frugality and sense of domestic responsibility. So this observation here, so the writer is giving us three main features about this focal point. Life is a casting off, is related to the needlework, shows the frugality and a sense of domestic responsibility. That's how you create observation about your focal point. And to do so, you need to understand the focal point precisely and transfer that understanding onto your readers. The rest of this paragraph is a combination of research in the field, that is 103, English 103, and critical analysis and reading the text precisely, that is 102. So you got to be careful in using this example because it's merging the two, while in 102 we, as at least I, tend to discourage research in the field and just ask students to focus on the textual pieces of evidence. But in 103 they need to have understood the text, have a good reading of the text to be able to apply that reading on their research. Okay, now look at this sentence here. As Susan Appleton notes, Swing conveys Linda's persistent desire to unify the family. She is the main reason why this family has managed to stay together, hence her depiction as a member who tries to mend everything from stocking to people. Another scholar here comes into play to support our writer's claim about casting off. So that's Bert Cardillo, and then we have other scholars here come in. So here our writer shows precisely how thorough he is in his research in the field. Why is the author doing that? He's trying to show that my observation, or his observation here, that his observation is unique in the field of scholarship about the salesman, and it's going to show an aspect that has gone unnoticed and overlooked among the scholars in the field. That's why he's showing and quoting multiple scholars. It's a research technique which we need in 103, but we tend to just wait on it and sit on it in 102. Okay, he's showing that although all these scholars have thought on the same subject and quotation or the text, they have overlooked the precise argument that I want to propose here. Okay, look at the second paragraph. It starts with the however, which means although all these scholars have done research and have argued and have talked in this field, they haven't said what I'm gonna say. That's why we have however. The phrase casting off reveals additional thematic and emotional threads in the play, especially when considered in the context of Linda's needlework. The OED, Oxford English Dictionary, that is textbook formula for writing essays. You have a focal point. The first thing you do, you try to understand the meaning and connotations of that focal point. The best way and method for doing that is to go into a dictionary that gives you meanings of that focal point, of that word or phrase that you normally and people usually don't know, or they just overlook. And that always happens. There are most of the words that we use, especially in texts, they have different meanings from what we think we know. And it's quite often that the author of the text is using the word or phrase in that sense that we don't know. And that the text is asking us and demanding us to go and find that meaning. OED, a dictionary, a trusted source of meanings for words and phrases, is your first step into understanding the focal point. And then based on that meanings and information that the source or dictionary provides for you, you expand and elaborate and unpack your observation to come up with the arguments. Look at this, how this author does it. The OED records that one definition of to cast off is a knitting term meaning to take the work off the wires, closing the loops and forming a selvage. Also known as binding off. It is the closing of stitches at the end of work. That's another reference. So one of the definitions coming from OED, one of them is coming from Stanfield and Griffiths. That's another source. Or, as the American Heritage Dictionary defines, to make the last row of stitches in knitting. So the author here has three observations or connotations about his focal point, and now he wants to merge and generate his own understanding of this focal point. Again, textbook formula of writing essays. Because casting off can be done only as part of the finishing of a knitted item, Linda's comment suggests not merely the idea of a regretted and inevitable loss, but ironically, the more affirmative sense of a complete project or an accomplished task. So you see, whereas all the previous scholars have been discussing about how she tries to bond and create and saw these things together to prevent that inevitable loss. Our writer here says that, quite ironically, it is an affirmative sense of a complete project. Mending that what is worn symbolizes both her realization of weakness and failure and her tireless determination to renew whatever has become outworn in her family's possession and lives. Linda's remark speaks to her resilience and quality, praised more often by Miller than by many of her critics. What we have here is the argument, topic sentence, that is talking precisely about the argument, what the argument is. So what? You have shown us, okay, that this casting off, many scholars have talked about it, but none of them have said what you want to say. And then you have shown its hidden meanings, connotations, through the use of dictionaries and resources. And then you're showing us that, okay, what it could mean. So what? The answer to this question of so what is, or would be, and could be your argument. And that's what the speaker here is doing. It's Linda's remark speaks to her resilience, equality praised by Miller, right? And it talks about what does it symbolize, and it symbolizes her realization of weakness, that realization. So from one phrase, life is a casting off, from that phrase, this author is creating this new understanding, this new reading of Linda's role in the play, which is very brilliant, because you need to understand that phrase quite well to be able to generate such a reading of it. And it's doable once you follow the steps. Check your focal point, understand its semantic field, look it up in the dictionary and see the connotations, hidden meanings, bring those out and merge them together and see what they are telling you, what they are showing you. Okay? And that's how things should be done. And then the rest of the essay, the author is trying to merge like his findings in the text and the research about the text to substantiate his claim, to substantiate his understanding of this one phrase in the text. Again, please notice that he is not generalizing about the text. He is just jumping onto the point about that one phrase. He's not even talking about the entire death of a salesman. No, just that one phrase and nothing else. And then as I will put this, you can find this essay on through the library and give it a read. You'll see that the rest of the essay, there's no generalization. There's no talk about any other parts of the play. It's just about the cast-off. Look at the sentences I have highlighted here. While the mechanical repetitiveness of her sewing might hint at the iron repression of her exceptions to Will's behavior, it also conveys her desire to mend her family in a way that demonstrates her just how attention should be paid, not through Happy's sleazy bravado or Biff's anguished recriminations, but through the performance of the mundane chores essential for any functional family. She, the last sentence, she has experienced being cast off, spurned by her philandering husband, but has managed in turn to cast off that emotional shock. So casting off now has a dual meaning, the author is suggesting, has dual meaning. And that's what Linda has been cast off by the family, especially the husband. At the same time, she has managed in turn to cast off that emotional shock that initial casting off has created for her. So understanding one phrase is so important that you can write an entire essay on. But how you understand it and how you propose an argument about it, that is important. The next example I want to review with you is this one. Again, we have a text, James Joyce's The Dead. A short story that sometimes I teach. Again, like, there are many talks about this short story, and it's the most famous short story in 20th century, and there are many pages written about it on Google. So a simple search will give you thousands of pages of material to work with. But would any of those pages present a critical analysis of it? I doubt. This essay that I have here by Tanaka is presenting a very nuanced, critical reading and analysis of the text that needs a specific attention. And this is a very good example on how we should, understand and analyze a text. Again, the first example that I shown you here, the author works with one sentence in the text, and that is a very big, long, and huge task to analyze one full sentence. The second one was that the author casting off, life is a casting off, is analyzing one phrase. That's why it's mentioning multiple aspects of cast off and life being a cast off, multiple combinations of these words come into play as the author wants to analyze it. And here, the author is only analyzing one word. In neither of these cases, can you find that the author speaks generally about the text at all. No, there's no general talk, and that's the error that I want to see, not to see in any of your essays. I want to see that you all avoid a generalization. Don't talk about the text as a general thing, or the author, or sometimes, like even not about the text. I see that the students talk about general, like about the issue, like this is, and this could be any adjective or word here. This is a truth in humanity. Sometimes they start like this: throughout history, blah blah blah. These are very general and unacceptable forms of writing that we should avoid. Look at this example here. In the Dead. So it's not valorizing or acclaiming or praising the text at all. Although this is the most famous, the best text ever written, the best short story ever written. No, just In the Dead. And when you say The Dead, we know who the author is. You don't even need to name the author. In the Dead. Why does the word galoshes, rubber overshoes, remind Greta of Christy Minstrel? So what the author here is doing is problematizing a notion in the text. And that's another technique that we need to practice in English 102 and 103. To be able to find a focal point in the text and properly problematize that notion, that focal point, that word. Here, as the author is simply asking a question: why does it remind this character of that other character? Or that notion? The prevailing explanation has been that Greta's dactylic Galloway pronunciation of galoshes is close to golly shoes, which gollywong, with gollywong as a possible connection. So that form of pronunciation and in the Irish accent of the word galoshes connects that idea to Christy Minstrel, which is a figure in Irish history. The speaker, the writer here, problematizes the notion and says this is the prevailing, something, the dominant explanation in the field. And then again, research skill, something that we have, researching the context around that issue, it's a skill that is and should be developed in English 103. Eric Rosenblum suggests, okay, that Galatian were the geysers of Scottish solstice dramas. They blackened their face with soot, as I learned about Galatian performers in the Christmas time Mummer play of Death and Resurrection in Galatians, the Scottish folk play by Brian. I became convinced that Rosenblum had found the link Joyce had in mind. Galatian players, whose heyday was the latter half of the 19th century, according to Hayward, did traditionally blacken their faces. Joyce was familiar with the Mummer play genre and may have seen such plays near Dublin, as Henry Glassy notes. So what we have here is a very short summary of the research in the field to know, first of all, this scholar has suggested a meaning for or a connection for Galatian and that memory, or even for Galatians itself, there is a different form of explanation. And to know that, okay, could these observations in the field, the scholarship in the field, explain the initial question, the problematization we have? Greta sees the galoshes as evidently thinks of the Galatians and then the Christian minstrels. She recalls, perhaps vaguely, that Christmas Resurrection play with its blackface performance has an American counterpart in Christy minstrel shows, whose players wear heavy dark makeup and galoshes or cloaks. Gabriel is not amused because he senses what she is thinking, although he is pleased with his galoshes, the latest fashion on the continent. It may well be that, in her opinion, wearing them makes him akin to a Christian minstrel performer. So, again, rewinding and reviewing. We problematize the use of the word galoshes in the text. We want to understand why this word has such an affect on Greta. And then this scholar suggests that, okay, this could be an explanation. Okay, then we problematize that explanation. If that is the case, if that's related to dramas in which players use black masks or dark faces, um, these dark masks or makeups that might have a counter affect on Gabriel, the husband. Greta is the wife, Gabriel, the husband. And now the problem is bigger, right? And now we, like, from one word, we are just unpacking one word and analyzing its affects on two characters, and we want to understand and create a reading of the text based on this one word. Galatians and Galatians, right? Both pronunciation, the pronunciation of the second one is also Galatians. Galatians and Galatians are pronounced similarly, except for the N in the latter, with the stress on the second middle syllable. So you see, jumping right into analyzing the phonetic and linguistic aspects of the words, something that nobody does, right? Have you, like, who pays attention to which syllabus in syllable in a word has the emphasis? Because as we speak, like usually myself, I don't pay attention to this detail, or even as I read, right? The origin and meaning of the term Galatians is an enigma, notes Howard. Skeet's etymological dictionary, again, classical note here, basic textbook formula, looking up the word in relevant dictionaries, understanding the meaning and connotations of the word. However, defines galashi as a wooden shoe or pattern made all of a piece without any latchet or type of leather, and worn by the poor clown in winter. So you see, as you dig deep into the meaning of one word, there are many things that would come up there. You will find things. This is a skill that you need to develop in English 102. Understand. And it's not the essay writing that we are going to practice here is not a magic. We just need to understand how to understand, like, find a focal point, problematize it, understand it, unpack its meaning, and relate these connotations and meanings together, and understand their inferences, the logical ideas that these connotations and hidden meanings would cast on us, and just say something about them. Just logically put them together to argue something about the text. So the observation, it matters here, right? And look at the last sentence in this paragraph that you have on the page here. Thus, Joyce's linking of galoshes to poor clowns in clogs is rooted in the history of the word. Again, right? Understanding the affects on one word from multiple aspects. That's how this writer is working here. So, again, this essay is available on through the library, and you can find it, Galoshes or Galatian, Dr. Brown, and The Dead. The next example that I want to review, and the last one, is this one. Again, on a text, on Joyce's text, of course. And I hope that by bringing all these examples, you'll have, first of all, an idea of what an analysis means in English studies generally, and how you should approach it in 102, English 102, or English 103, how you should approach writing an essay and analyzing and researching about the text. Okay. Again, as previous one, in the last example, you had this author talking about the word galoshes, and unpacking the connection and links of that word between other ideas, and the affects it creates in the text. However, that was not just a precise focus on the word, but bringing in the similarity between that word and other words, like because of the Irish accent that Greta speaks in, that similarity arises from that. And that's a very neat observation that we have in that essay. Here we have something more nuanced. Just looking at one word, no matter how strange that or simple that word might look, that's one word in the text. And unpacking and creating an argument, and giving a critical reading of the text based on that one word. That's the technique we want to learn. And that's the purpose of essay writing. Why do we write essays? We are writing essays in order to shed new lights on the text. Thousands of readers have read a modest proposal throughout history. Why should we read it again? Why should we write about it again? Right? Hasn't everything that had been there said yet, or no? We, as individuals, every individual cognitive apparatus have the capacity to see new things in everything. And our role here is to understand and unpack the text in new ways and shed new lights, create new understandings of the text, so that it would help us understand our relationships and the society and the politics and the world that we are living in more precisely. In this example, Joyce's Neanderthal Tale, tracing the past in Finnegan's Wake. That's the title. Okay. Devlin here is skillfully analyzing Finnegan's Wake, one word in the Finnegan's Wake. Remember, essay writing is not about analyzing the entire text. It's about analyzing.
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that.
It's about understanding the text based on one single focal point. And as you change your focal point to a different focal point, then you have many different readings of it. You can have many different readings of the text. Towards the end of the opening chapter of Finnegan's Wake, the voice of an imagined eulogist warns HCE as Mr. Finnemore about the dangers of waking. That's the observation again. We always need an observation. The observation is not generalizing about the text. It's not saying that this is the best text ever. It's not about saying that the author wrote this text in that century. It's not about saying that how history of humanity had worked. No, it's about foregrounding and highlighting specific aspects in the text, creating an observation. The speaker's rationales relates to the perils of exploring the urban landscape. The dreamer would probably get lost given changes in the roading. His feet would be endangered by the damp. Unpleasant noises would disturb his hearing, and his vision would be assaulted by a sick, bankrupt man and a fallen woman with an illegitimate child. So what we have here is not a summary of the text. You haven't read the text, but it's not a summary of the text. You should note that the writer here is just elaborating that observation. Why the eulogist warns HCE, right, about waking, the dangers of waking. And these are the dangers. Just unpacking the observation we have. So this danger, the dangers that he summarizes, creates a dystopia, or represents the dystopia. It's not that this dystopia is mentioned in the text, But the author of this text, Devlin, um, if that's, yes, Devlin, is observing something in the text, and what he observes, the dangers of waking, to him creates or insinuates or hints at a form of dystopia. And he says, okay, if that's a dystopia, that is a part of a larger dream language of anxiety that closes chapter 1. You know, you see, in this sentence, in this short sentence, is expanding the observation. The eulogist concludes with questionable persuasiveness that AC is better off in a furnished structure that resembles the interior of an Egyptian burial monument, a monument for a man, as opposed to an immortal, so that ultimately he will be Finn no more, Mr. Finnemore. The image of the entombed self is repeated in chapter 1 in varying terms. So we see, we have the observation, we understand that observation as dystopia, so we create an understanding of our observation. That's and then, so we are just dealing with unpacking the observation. We are just unpacking the observation. Okay. What do we do with that observation again? This warning about strolling around the city has some telling quirks that expresses claustrophobia. Gates are customarily kept shut to separate antagonistic animals, but here one is by old custom left open, revealing the dreamer's desire for freedom of movement and means of escape. The iron barrier becomes a gate, right? So it's, again, unpacking that one observation. We haven't got to the main argument yet. We haven't seen the focal point yet, but just understand, because of the, some texts are difficult. I'm showing you this example because one of the texts that they teach in English 102 is a difficult text. The title is The Blind Owl, and it has similarities with the Finnegan's Wake. That's why I'm using this example to see that even on a very difficult text, it's not very difficult to focus on one word. You just need to, create a context around your observation of that one word. Okay, so up to this paragraph that I have highlighted, we have the observation unpacked for us. Now look at the next paragraph. Ongoing images of the self as passed away, buried, entombed, and or recumbent constitutes perhaps the strongest leitmotif in Finnegan's Wake. So whatever he has observed up there, now he is summarizing that observation into these ongoing images of self as passed away. More specifically, they reveal Joyce's interest in methods that explore the record both the past and the past in his Neanderthal. Okay, Neanderthal tale. That's the word Joyce creates. That's why it's so difficult to pronounce. So Neanderthal tale is the focal point here. Why? Because this word refers to anthropology, paleontology, archaeology, and they are all mixed together. And this tale also relates to its Neanderthal tale, which is talking about past, a self as passed away, and past as a history, the history of the past. And at the same time, it's Neanderthal tale insinuating a form of dystopia, where eventually the characters in this tale would perish and be passed because they are facing that dystopian, uh, you know, setting, right? So it would have been very difficult for the writer here to start with the focal point without the background. So he needed that background observation in the text to come up with this, focal point, and it's his observation of that. Anthropology, paleontology, and archaeology, although these fields are distinct, Joyce often merges them. The latter two may be the referent of the phrase photography in mud. The aim of this essay, now, after creating the observation around the Neanderthal tale, the focal point, now we have a very precisely mentioned, clearly emphasized topic sentence, which directly, without any ambiguity, tells us what is the aim of this essay. The aim of this essay are threefold. First, to examine one source book only mentioned briefly in recent criticism. That's a research part that Joyce used to learn more about the prehistory of writing. Second, to interpret a few scenes that evoke these three investigative fields that are related to Neanderthal tale. One scene in its relationship to the trope of synecdoche, and finally to explore the implications of ALP, that's the wife of HCE, as the agent of excavation and burial. One word: Neanderthal tale. We understand that word as referring to anthropology, paleontology, and archaeology, and it talks about dead people passed away and the past as history. And then understanding these features in the word, we see that as a form of, we can observe a form of dystopian insinuation in the meaning of the word. And then it says, I want to analyze and unpack and understand the implications of this word in the text. That's another form of writing, an essay. And then the writing goes on by finding, first of all, it's a research. So they find research in the field, which in 102 we don't need that research in the field. We just need the reading of the text. And then substantiate their claim by finding similar points in the text that would help understand and unpack that focal point more precisely. So I hope these examples will be useful, this video and what I reviewed here, for you to understand how we are dealing with text and reading and essay writing in English field, in the field of English studies. At the same time, to understand that essay writing is not magic, as I have many times mentioned, and I usually mention this in class, that we are looking for forensic analysis of the text. That is, finding, observing something in the text, creating an observation, analyzing that observation, and coming up with an analysis of that of our observation, which is usually a focal point and could be as short as a word or phrase, and to show how we can change the reading of the text based on that one single focal point. And this is forensic because we are not enforcing and imposing our ideas, our biases, or our beliefs onto the text. We are not generalizing ideas, grand ideas about history and humanity, and putting it forcefully forcing it onto the text. We are not saying that this is how I think the text should mean. We are saying that this is how the text, or what the text means if you look at this specific part of the text. And the language, okay, you can use these examples as like, and their language, just copy their language. The phraseology is very important. You can practice their phraseology as practice in order to create your own essay, your own style of writing. Not that to plagiarize the content or idea, just understand how they play with the phrases and how they use phrases in order to create an essay. I hope that you're doing well and you're having fun wherever and you are and whenever you're watching this. And if you have any questions or any ambiguities or any concerns, or if what I say here or present here creates any further question marks for you, get in touch with me and we can talk about it in a live meeting in more details. Thank you and enjoy your time.